Welcome, everyone. Here with me today for this episode of HR Tech Chat is Randy Cooper. He's the Chief of Strategy and founder of PeopleStrategy. Just the other day, he and I had a fascinating discussion around concrete and abstract HCM. We'll include a link to a research report of ours around concrete and abstract HCM with this video, by the way. And we just thought it would be interesting to revisit the conversation. Welcome, Randy.
Thanks, Brent. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So why don't we start there? A lot of people hear the term abstract and concrete HCM and they wonder, what does that mean? Yeah, I've heard it, put different ways: tactical versus strategic HCM, soft versus hard benefits, these sorts of things. When we came up with the idea of concrete versus abstract, we wanted to just kind of give it a new twist for people to think about it in a new way and maybe understand that that both are important. So I guess I probably let the horse out of the barn there with that statement, but in any event, what are some of the things that you folks are doing over at PeopleStrategy around these concepts, or some of the ideas that you have that you're looking to deploy and implement?
Sure. Yeah, and as from our prior conversation, the terminology we use is hard and soft. Simple, straightforward. We define it as hard. HR is basically the process, clearly defined things that you need to do to deliver human resources, benefits, payroll to your employees. So those are very defined. We know what they are. Every vendor needs to do them and needs to do them well. And so I know from our perspective and my perspective of building this company, our focus was on the Trinity, to me, as HR, benefits, and payroll. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've seen it back in the days when they were very tightly integrated, through the 90s and the aughts, when they seemed to split apart and companies would have a different vendor doing their benefits technology than doing their payroll versus their HR. And now in the last decade, we've started to see some rational thought, I think, again, bring those things together. They're so intertwined. You just open yourself up when those three pieces aren't very tightly integrated. So our focus had been in building those components, making sure that they were tightly integrated, that they were extremely modern, and could take us to where we want to take this company. And then recently, as you know, I stepped down as the CEO of the company to really focus on long-term strategy for the business. And that is kind of the beginning of the process, as we're really deeply now starting to look at the soft side of HR and how that intertwines. And I think what we've seen so far is that historically, there's hard providers and soft providers. There does not yet seem to be providers that cover the spectrum of both very well. There are some trying, but nobody's quite gotten there yet. And so I think for me, being a lot of my history has been around the hard HR part, I'm having a great time learning and speaking with other vendors and analysts and getting a feel for what is soft HR. Because it's still this thing that you called abstract. That's because it's abstract, right? We're trying to figure out what it's going to be. We've seen some things that are helping us formulate exactly how we believe we can create nice, consistent, integrated soft value for clients in our space as we move forward. And that's kind of that's where we're looking to focus.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you mentioned there. We don't know what abstract HCM really is. Like, we're working on, just as an industry, all of us in this market space, we're trying to figure out, okay, and I might be using this word wrong, but taxonomize it. What are the individual aspects of, what are the building blocks of abstract HCM? When you talk about when I find myself thinking about abstract HCM and writing about it, it always comes back to this idea of a better employer culture, which everyone wants, right? And it's one of those things, you know it when you see it, right? It's hard to define sometimes, but you really know the good employer, the positive employer culture when you see it. But beyond that, what are That's an interesting question. What are the building blocks of soft HCM, and what is the goal with getting better at soft HCM? I think, and one other thing I want to get out here before I forget is we were talking about it last time. Is this idea of how do you get an organization? When's the ideal time to get an organization, an employer, thinking about soft HCM, or can you sort of even, this isn't the right word, but almost trick them into thinking about it so early that they don't have to worry about it later.
Yeah, tricked is definitely not the right word there, but I know where you're going with it. I understand it. Yeah, I think, what, I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is my third business in the space that I've built in the last 30 years. So I'm very comfortable with recognizing all of us are at fault here. We are, especially us old guys with gray hairs. We're at fault because we get comfortable in what we do, and as a result, we don't step back and really look at it with brand new eyes. And I can't remember if on our last chat we talked about this, but as I was starting to figure out, what is this exactly? The first thing I did is we've been hiring a lot of folks lately, so I went to our director of HR and said, hey, can you get me a roundtable with half a dozen employees that have joined in the last month or two, and I want passive job seekers and I want active job seekers, and I just want to talk to them. And it was extremely enlightening to me, because the first thing I said to them is, guys, I'm a 56-year-old man. I haven't done a resume since I was 22. So, what the heck do I know about what it's like to be recruited and to go into an organization, and what exactly are you looking for? Because it's changing so rapidly, especially with work from home under COVID, I think is rapidly changing how this is going to be approached. But back to kind of your core question, I think one of the challenges we have as an industry, and this encapsulates every part of the audience. That's you guys as the analysts and advisors. It's the vendors, and it's the companies. The challenge that I see is the fact that companies that have been around a long time doing hard HR do not truly understand and haven't taken the time to think about what is soft HR. If you ask somebody in a normal, hey, what do you think is soft HR? You're asking that question right now. I'd say, it's training, it's performance management, right? And performance management is something that I just loathe, because I look at performance management as this litigation prevention tool kind of thing. I think that's how it was originally positioned or thought about internally to HR organizations. It's something I have to do. I need to keep these records so that down the road I have a hard copy of it. And I think that it totally missed the point of what you're trying to do. You're trying to help your employees figure out where their weaknesses are and how they can strengthen themselves, how they can get better. It's also, no question, for the employer, an opportunity to understand what is important to your employees, what makes a great employee. And that's where I think we get lost, because again, the old time hard providers just haven't yet understood what it is, and they're still clinging too much to this HR process-based type of thought. And then you have the new guys that come around, and there's a lot of them out there. I'm not going to name any of them, but that are purely soft players, right? And those are the ones you and I were talking about. They have some really cool concepts, but the challenge becomes, how do you create ROI? How do you demonstrate in a sales cycle ROI? Bigger companies, and we've seen this in HR forever, right? We see big companies adopt the new ideas sooner because they have a little more flexibility around budget and capability. Sometimes more progressive companies will look and say, I can invest into some soft technology that I'm not going to get a tangible, can't define the tangible benefit today. But isn't that every marketing dollar ever spent? Every marketing dollar ever spent is about creating your brand and your culture and getting people to understand who you are. And ultimately, I don't think I don't think either one of those models is going to work, because these guys on the hard side they're going to have a tough time getting their minds around where they need to be. And the guys on the soft side are having a hard time creating a down market, a viable business model. Now, what does that lead to? That leads
Yeah.
to consolidation. So I think we're going to see that come together. That has its own set of challenges. But when I look at it, as I've stepped back and kind of said, what is soft HR and what would I want to accomplish? I'm a business owner, right?
Yeah.
What do I want to accomplish for my 150 employees? Well, I want to make sure that every time we hire, we get the best candidate applying and wanting to be working for PeopleStrategy. My goal that I've laid out for the company is to be a destination employer. You want to be the place that people say, I want to work there because they care about their employees. They have great policies to help manage work-life balance and all of those things. But how do you do that? And then once you've gotten that person to be interested in your company and you hire them, how do I gauge who that person is to clearly be able to not only help them develop? If they're self-aware, they know where their weaknesses are. If they're not, their peers are going to know where their weaknesses are, and hopefully they can take that self-reflection and we can provide the tools to help them be able to self-reflect, improve, and get better. So what you and I had talked about, one of the challenges is if I'm trying to sell soft HR only today, it's really hard to create the ROI in the down in the mid-market. If I'm willing and able, which is where I think we have an interesting viewpoint on it,
Yeah.
I can not focus on what the analysts, no offense to anybody, say, but it's all, we've heard so much about predictive hiring and all of the predictive analytics and whatnot, and there's no question that can happen. But I sure don't want to be the sales guy that has to go into a 150-man company that's struggled their way through COVID and had to really tighten their belt left and right and say, hey, I want to bring you the solution that if you use it right, 3 years from now, you're going to get some value out of it. And I can't tell you exactly what it is yet. That's a tough sell. But if I'm delivering your hard HR and I'm a forward-thinking vendor, I can begin to, I call it plant seeds, right? I can begin to plant seeds into my product that don't cost you anything. You're paying for the core things that you get from me, HR, benefits, and payroll, time. Now I can start to basically use in my processes without charging anything else. It goes back to the old days of when we used to get a release every couple of years in the enterprise world and get so excited when we saw new gadgets and new things that were coming. That's kind of been lost in the SaaS world since everything turns so fast and your releases are pretty much constant and iterative. But what I like then see the idea of is that I can actually begin to build into our product suite capabilities that employers will want to use. There's no cost associated with them, so they're excited about it. And your term tricked. The point is, if they are utilizing these tools to get benefit today, an example I gave you before was just embedded survey capability, right?
Yes,
There's so
exactly.
many ways that I can deliver a survey tool that my HR administrator, my clients can utilize to create value, culture value, and everything else in their shop. But the beautiful thing is, if that's what you're focused on, you're getting value. And behind the scenes, I'm actually gaining data and information that today isn't giving me a trend line. Tomorrow's not giving me a trend line. But 3 years from now, after you've been creating value the whole time for yourself around that, I should be able to come with some new advancements and new features that I go, hey, that stuff you've been doing for the past 3 years? It's all in our database. We have all of it. And look, we've put an analytic tool over it. We've put these specific things that show you insights into what is it that your employees care most about? What are they gaining the most? So,
and what's interesting about that is, at the very least, that's a customer retention tool. At the very least. It's so much more, but it is a customer retention tool. Absolutely. By the way, as an aside, I think we would be remiss not to marvel at your background.
Pun intended.
Yes. Actually, I was afraid for a moment that it was DC Comics instead, but I thought it would work either way. Anyway, I just want to go back to something you said earlier. around performance management and sort of the genesis. What were the origins of performance management? We all know it was, companies wanted to basically have an audit trail. They wanted to protect themselves in the event that they need to, let somebody go or for whatever reason. But one thing that's interesting is going back to this idea of abstract versus concrete HCM versus abstract versus concrete and abstract HCM. It really is I think, because you look at performance management, there was always the opportunity. There was always just baked into the idea or the notion of performance management or nurturing the performance of an employee. There was always this idea of being able to help the employee become better and to improve that relationship between the employee and the organization. So even though the origins of performance management were all fixated on the concrete abstract of performance management, it always had the abstract potentiality. There was always a potentiality of abstract there from the beginning. And this is the thing about abstract and concrete HCM. I don't think I have encountered a single concrete aspect of HCM that is not also abstract. Even the most concrete, I think we can all agree the most concrete aspect of HCM is payroll, probably, right? I mean, what is more concrete than paying people for the job they do? I mean, that's essential. That's the essence of the exchange of labor for remuneration. But even that has an emotional aspect to it. There's an abstract quality to payroll, and we're stretching the meaning of the word abstract here, but it's a tool to help people understand what we're referring to here. I mean, imagine somebody missing their payday or getting paid less than they were supposed to. That's an incredibly impactful event on the employee that is going to have a bad effect on employee engagement. That person might even leave. It could be a really important, hard to replace employee. So I just think, it's interesting that so much of HCM, companies get into it because it's seen as something that they have to do. And what's the definition of have to do? Well, there's sort of a limited scope of vision in terms of the definition of scope of what we have to do, but we actually have to do the abstract too, and so it's interesting.
Well, yeah, let me flip that around on you, because I agree with you, but let me give you a different analogy than payroll, which is again hard HR. At the end of the day, it's data, right? Underneath it, it's data. I have data about every employee that I need, their taxes, their deductions, everything about them to manage them through my corporate processes, right? And so the point you were making is, hey, if my corporate process breaks, I'm going to create damage to my culture. That's an absolutely correct statement. But I would also argue that historically, because of not all companies have yet reached the point that they have a strong core triumvirate of HR benefits and payroll technology. Once those things are strong and in place, that's the time that your HR professionals get to stretch their legs. That's the moment when they don't have to spend a whole day worrying about getting their payroll done and getting it right. They have more opportunity to try and think of other things. Now, where that comes into play is, I think, we have not yet historically had the opportunity for corporations to try creative culture building type policies and then know if they're successful through data. So it's great to have like, for instance, I'll use an example. I don't know, 6 years ago or so, I read an article about DTO, discretionary time off, which is basically unlimited PTO. Right. Yeah. And the first articles that I read had a real negative connotation associated with it. And from the employee's viewpoint, and the employee's viewpoint was, hey, the only reason you're doing this is because then you're going to be able to hold it against me if I take too much time off. Right. Yeah. And what's beautiful, though, is every company that's put in a DTO type policy that uses a hard HR system that monitors time and PTO policy, vacation time, etc. They have now the data to prove how efficient it can be. And at PeopleStrategy, we've had a DTO policy for, I don't know, over 5 years now, where we got rid of all vacation, all sick time, and we simply say to every employee, you can take as much time off as you need to find the right work-life balance that you need. Now, that comes with requirements on both sides, right? It means that employees can't abuse it, but it means also that employers can't use it against the employee. What we actually found is we found that we actually have to work with all of our mid-managers, constantly training them and pushing them to be the positive force to get their employees to take time off. Because I don't know about other companies, but we just have really dedicated employees that work, and you're like, no, go home. So
take some time.
Yeah, so so we actually, we police our DTO policy to make sure it's being used enough. Where once you have that data, you have that ability to look and keep an eye on it and see, is it having the right impacts that you want on your culture? Going back to surveys, if now I can survey my employees once a year, or not once a year, once a quarter, and say, hey, tell me what the top 3 perks are of working at this company that you like, right? I'm going to find out pretty quick whether DTO gets listed as one of them. We do sabbaticals. These are things that kind of abstract culture building policies that companies have toyed with, but because they've never been able to ultimately come around and then have the head of HR, the CHRO, hand a report to the CEO and say, here, you can see how we've improved because of these popular things that we're doing. Now we're getting to that point, and it's our jobs as vendors to help provide the tools that are going to help HR companies be able to spend a larger percentage of their time on those strategic, soft pieces of their business, and yet have the analytical data to be able to justify the decisions that they're making.
Well, it's interesting with the DTO example, right? I mean, the data smashed the assumption that if you institute DTO, everyone's going to just take all the time off they want willy-nilly, and we're all going to go to hell in a handbasket. I mean, that doesn't happen, at least at the organization that you mentioned. And my guess is that it typically doesn't happen. But there's no way to shatter that false assumption without having that technology in place, which I think is sort of a reiteration of, or a paraphrasing of what you said, which is really interesting. And there's also this jumping to conclusions that is in that thinking, and I think also in the concrete versus abstract thinking in general, right? There's a jumping to conclusion, well, yeah, that abstract stuff sounds nice, but we got to focus on this concrete stuff. That's what's important. It's interesting. You also brought up something that I think really gets to the crux of this. Where, there's some ways to think about this, recently I've been thinking, okay, where does the technology end and the leadership begin, right? What's the right mix there? Obviously it doesn't take just leadership. You need the right technology in place, but also doesn't just take technology. You need the right leadership in place. But it's not, I don't think it's linear where they're kind of meeting each other necessarily. It's more of a, what's the right mix, or how do you get to that point? Am I making any sense, right? So
yeah, you are, but you are, and again, it all depends on the audience too, right? Our focus at PeopleStrategy is the small to mid market, right? Anywhere up to, we can go really high. We just don't, right? We did before, and we were like, that's not where we want to be. To me, the perfect customer for us is 100 to 200 employees, and they're young enough as an organization that they're realizing that these things are important. They're being led by folks that are going, we need to find the balance between technology and leadership. And in many cases, they don't have a resource to do that. I don't know if I used this term the other day with you, but to me, I consider us a Sherpa. That's our job, is to help our clients understand how they can utilize technology, merge it with great thought processes and leadership around culture to ultimately create a solution. So if we can Sherpa them, we can guide them, we can help them put those things together. As you know, we focus a lot on the benefits side of the house, and I get kind of upset because when you say employee benefits, everybody immediately says health and welfare, right? And that's just such a small part of what that term should mean, right? There's so many benefits that I as an employer need to provide to my employees to make them want to work at the company that I'm at. And it's not just that you gave me medical and dental at a good, reasonable price with a good plan. There's so much more to it. So that's where we're really, since we did an acquisition in 4 or 5 years ago and got ourselves into that space, as we've really started focusing a lot more effort on that side, we're seeing the ability to really coach customers and help them through those thought processes that maybe they're not ready, they haven't grown into, and they're getting ready to grow into it. I want to help them start that journey through, understanding how they can find the right balance.
Well, the other thing is that, I think an inescapable byproduct of that is you're probably going to save those organizations money, because you're going to help those employees understand what type of plans they need or other types of benefits that they might want or not want. And I've seen that, in a previous life, that kind of deep consultative, high touch approach. It helps organizations save money. So it seems like a nice to have up front, but it's nice to have because it is nice to have.
Well, remember when I said before that, I kind of talked about a little jokingly and a little facetiously, but not really, that we used to have the triumvirate together back in the 80s, and then they split apart in the 90s and aughts, right? HR went here, benefits went there, payroll went there. Now that we're getting that hard HR, triumvirate back together, I think that just the fact that technology has moved so much further in the past decade, we are at a really interesting inflection point for HR, where it used to be that I would need to build that entire platform end to end to do all these crazy things that I'm not an expert at. Now, there are companies out there that specifically focus in one specific portion of the huge HR silo, right? Whether it's learning management, whether it's rewards and recognition, whatever it is, there's a lot of them out there, and they do them really great, right? So now we have an opportunity with service layer architecture and the really the kind of the global acceptance or industry acceptance of shared APIs between vendors. It puts us in a really interesting place where we are able to kind of intellectually, consultatively understand what is it that would really be a soft driver for our clients, and then we can find the right way to bring those things in. Like one example, benefits, again, everybody thinks about medical and dental, but a huge benefit that we're seeing uptake on now is student loan forgiveness with our partner Peanut Butter. So so ultimately, they specifically focus on a program that allows employers to basically match and pay off principal on debt for their employees. What a great benefit to a Gen Z employee who's trying to figure out how they're going to take care of their college debt. So all of those things, just the fact that individual entities are picking up slices of soft and doing it, and the fact that now we have the technology to more efficiently integrate and tightly integrate that specific niche piece is just, it's going to be a godsend to our industry over the next 5 years.
And being not a one size fits all for those soft pieces, right? Because it's a different type of thing that might matter to a boomer or a Gen Xer versus that Gen Z or maybe millennial who's struggling with their debt. We are actually out of time. It went by so fast.
Why?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Randy. This has been fantastic. We'll have to do another one of these soon. Just lots of stuff to think about. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was wonderful. I always love chatting with you guys.
Thanks. Take care and have a wonderful weekend.
Take care. Hope it gets warmer for you.
Yeah, me too.